Hi, patrons. Welcome to another mini episode of Crime Family and happy holidays. It's the holiday season, and we hope you're all celebrating with family and friends. And as a special holiday gift to thank you for being a patron, we have a special Christmas mini episode for you. And in this episode, I'm going to be covering the story of the Lawson Family Massacre, which took place on Christmas Day in a small North Carolina town back in 1929. So almost 100 years ago, this story is from. And what better way to celebrate Christmas, if you celebrate Christmas, than to hear a nice, uplifting murder story? Happy holidays.
Whole family murdered on Christmas.
Yeah.
Have a good holiday.
Yeah. So the Lawson family was a large family who lived in a farming community of Germantown, North Carolina. And the family consisted of Charles and Fanny Lawson, who married in 1911, and their 7 children: Arthur, Marie, Carrie, Maybelle, James, Raymond, and Mary Lou. Their third born child, named William, actually died at the age of 6 due to complications from pneumonia. So at the time that this massacre happened, there were 7 children. So Charles, Fanny, and their 7 children lived in a farmhouse near Charles's brother's house, and they were just a typical and traditional farming family in the 1920s. And a few weeks before Christmas in 1929, Charles took his wife and children into town to get a family portrait done. And this allegedly caused quite a bit of confusion among the locals in the town because the family was not well off. They struggled to make ends meet on their farm, and the cost of keeping 7 children clothed and fed was a large expense. So others found it odd that the couple would be doling out this extra cash to get a professional portrait done. Because back then it was really only something that the rich did because, it cost a lot of money. So the family went into town and they had the portrait done, and Charles bought new clothes for the kids, and it seemed to be a normal and happy family day out on the town, as Charles said that the gifts and the portrait were part of a, quote, Christmas surprise, end quote. However, it was only weeks after this seemingly normal day out when Charles Lawson would do the unthinkable. On December 25th, 1929, it was Christmas morning, and the oldest daughter, Marie, was up early to prepare making one of her favorite dishes in preparation for the Christmas dinner that was happening that night. And Charles and his oldest son, Arthur, both went out hunting that morning, but during their hunting trip ran out of ammunition. So as a result, Arthur made his way into town to go and buy more ammunition. So there are different details about this depending on which source you read. So for example, there is a podcast I listened to called Deadly Secrets, The Lawson Family Murder, that says that it was Charles's nephew, Sanders Lawson, and his oldest son, Arthur, who went rabbit hunting. And they were told to go into town to get more. So whether it was Arthur and his cousin or just Arthur, the details are very different. I listened to a podcast and watched a few YouTube videos on it and read some articles, and there's a lot of conflicting information in the case. So it's not really crystal clear the exact details of what happened, so I tried to put together sort of the details of it based on what most sources were saying. But depending on the source, the details will vary. In either scenario, Charles was left back at the house with Fanny and the rest of the children, while Arthur went into town to get more ammunition. Marie and Fanny were busy preparing Christmas dinner, and daughters Carrie and Maybelle decided that they wanted to go over to their aunt and uncle's house, which was just close to the farmhouse. So the 2 young girls bundled up, and they left the house to go to their aunt and uncle's, which in order to get to, they had to kind of walk by and past the family barn. And as they were walking past the barn, their father Charles ambushes them and shoots them both with his shotgun. Then he bludgeoned them both to death before dragging them back into the barn and laying them down with rocks underneath their heads. Then he made his way back into the home and shot his wife Fanny as she was peeling potatoes on the porch. So again, there are various reports of these events, and some of them have different details. So for instance, some sources say that Fanny was shot by Charles as she entered the house, and then others claims that she was shot on the porch, like I said. So either way, Fanny was the next victim after the 2 girls. And this causes Marie to begin screaming, because obviously she could see what happened and she heard what happened. So she begins screaming, and then the 2 youngest boys go and they try to hide. But Charles then shoots Marie dead by the fireplace, and then makes his way to locate the two younger boys who were only 4 and 2 years old at the time. So he manages to find them and instantly shoots the both of them as well. And then he sets his sights on the youngest child of them all, which was 4-month-old Mary Lou, who was laying in her crib at the time of the massacre. So Charles doesn't shoot her, but instead bludgeons her to death in her crib. So in only a matter of minutes, Charles is the only family member remaining at the home, and the only surviving child was Arthur, who was in town getting the ammunition and was not at the scene when the murders occurred. So right after the massacre, Charles flees with his shotgun into the woods, and it was his brother Elijah, who was passing by the home later that day, who found the bodies of Fanny and 3 of the children when he got up close and he kind of looked through the windows of the house. This immediately threw the town into chaos as Elijah alerted the local sheriff via telegram of the incident, and nearby farmers who were in the area could kind of like see or hear the commotion. So they came by the home with their guns, and nobody knew what was going on, and they hadn't really yet put the pieces together of the puzzle. So they didn't really know, like at this point, Charles was missing because they couldn't see him, but he wasn't necessarily a suspect, and Arthur wasn't at the scene either. And again, it's unclear exactly when Arthur arrived back at the home. Like some sources say that it was Arthur who found the bodies when he returned home from town. So I don't really know because, like I said, every source kind of has a different answer, which is kind of weird. But
Did Arthur know what had happened? Like, did he hear from, because he was in town, did other people in town kind of inform him, or was he going in completely unaware?
well, that was actually my next sentence. Yeah.
Oh my god, okay.
You always do that. It's so funny. It's like you know exactly where it's going.
Yeah.
If Arthur wasn't the one to discover the bodies, then there's also conflicting reports about how he was alerted to the situation. So some sources say that a local ran into town to tell him what had happened, and then other sources say that Arthur just returned from town on his own to discover what was going on. So either way, he was the only surviving child because of this fact that he simply was not there at the time that Charles seemed to snap and decide to kill most of his family. It's kind of weird, too, how, like, the details can be so different. I mean, I guess it was almost 100 years ago, so no one really knows. And maybe records and reports aren't the same as they would be now, but it's just kind of weird, like, how varying the details are. And I guess the little mini details don't matter as much as, like, the major facts about what happened. But
like you said, because it was so long ago, and no one probably really knew what happened, so somebody just had one version, somebody else had another version, so they don't actually have a full complete story because nobody was there except for who did it. So
yeah, and it's probably not like now where they would have to like document and report everything that happens as it happens. Maybe it's more like they would write their notes or their report after the fact, so then by that time, you know, no one really remembers the order of events or how they happened. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and like forensics and like blood spatter probably was not a thing or as good as it is now back then, so they probably couldn't even figure out from the scene what exactly happened. So you know what I mean, like where she was specifically when she was shot, for example.
yeah, exactly. So they, yeah, like you said, and there was a lot of, like I said, farmers like and locals who were in around the area, and then you know word gets out and people start hearing about it, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people were around the house and on the property, so people see different or hear different things and see different things, and then they just kind of like put the pieces together on their own. So I guess it makes sense that there would be all these details that are just kind of vague. So Elijah, that's Charles's brother, who discovered the bodies, according to one of the accounts. So he thought that he could hear noises coming from inside the house. So that led him and many other of the locals to believe that there could be an intruder that was still inside the home. And this caused a delay in them even entering the house because they didn't know like how many intruders there were or like what if there was somebody in there or not. But eventually they do enter the house and they discover and identify the bodies. And all of the bodies were placed with their arms crossed and rocks beneath their heads. And it was actually the locals that had come to the home during the chaos that found blood and drag marks in the snow, which led them to the barn. And that's where they eventually found the bodies of the first 2 victims, Carrie and Maybelle. And so it's just basically a horrific scene at the house, and it's a crime scene. And then hours later, the police and the locals who were there hear a single gunshot wound coming from the nearby woods, and that's their first clue or indication of maybe where Charles might be. Because up to this point, he was still missing, and nobody knew if he was involved or if he had been abducted or what exactly was going on. The police enter the woods in the direction of the gunshot, and after a bit of searching, they end up finding Charles's body up against a tree, dead from a single self-inflicted gunshot wound. And found inside his pockets were two very strange notes. One said, quote, "Trouble can cause," end quote, and the other one said, quote, "No one to blame but," end quote. So these two incompleted phrases cause a lot of speculation and mystery as to what they meant, and they don't really make sense. And the circumstances surrounding how and why they were written was kind of weird. But based on the events of the day, it appears as though Charles was definitely losing his mind and was going through some type of mental health crisis, which caused him to suddenly snap and go on this rampage.
Were there any signs before any of this happened that he was kind of going downhill, or was it all like at once and he just snapped that day?
I do go into that a little bit later as well.
I was just gonna ask the same question.
Yeah, so your questions will be answered.
Also, was he drinking at all? Like, did they, I don't know if they did autopsies back then or if they could, like, check that, but did they ever find out if he was, like, drunk or anything?
So they do an autopsy of Charles's body for sure. Well, based on one of the sources that I read, which led them to a conclusion about something else, but nothing ever came out about whether he was drunk or high or anything like that. Like, I didn't read anything about that, so I'm assuming no, if there was nothing on that.
Was he having any like marital problems, or like something happened at work that wasn't going right, or?
Yeah, they had money issues.
Mm-hmm.
But besides money issues, did they have was their marriage in a downward spiral, or?
Yeah, was his wife having an affair or something?
I also get into all of this as well. I do. Well, there's a lot of like not much is like clear, so a lot of it's rumors or theories or speculation, but I do kind of touch on some of that stuff.
Okay, no more questions. We'll just let you get on with the story.
Yeah. So it's clear that Charles was losing his mind, or was going through some type of mental health crisis that caused him to suddenly snap and go on this rampage. Also, the police were able to determine that Charles had been pacing near the tree where his body was eventually found for a long period of time before he killed himself. So he seemingly ran into the woods in a panic, and based on, I guess his footprints and whatever, he was pacing in the same area back and forth for many, many hours, which kind of like led to this kind of like hollowed out sort of peat bit in like the ground, just because he had been pacing it so many times. And what was going through his mind, obviously we'll never know at that time, but maybe he was in disbelief about what he actually did, or maybe he was kind of in the throes of a mental breakdown. Maybe he was stressing out over what his next move should be. So who knows, but it definitely wasn't an instant decision to kill himself. Like I said, it was hours later when they heard the gunshot. So it seems like he came to this conclusion to kill himself after a few hours of pacing back and forth and trying to figure out what to do next. So by the end of that Christmas day, 8 of the 9 family members would end up dead, with the oldest son Arthur as the only survivor. Now, there's so much speculation as to what actually caused Charles to do this, and while most of this is speculative, there are theories going around as to what secrets may have been behind this incredibly random and violent act. So one theory that circulated after the murders was that Charles's violence and instability was caused by a head injury that he sustained before the massacre, but it's unclear how soon before the massacre that this happened. So whether it was months before or years before, but all we know is that it was at some point before. He was out renovating the barn. During this renovation, he was hit in the head with an axe. And then after this, reports suggest that others around him, like his family members or friends, noticed a change in his behavior. So he was suffering from headaches a lot. He would lose his temper more often, and he seemed to be easily agitated. So it was speculated that he suffered some type of head trauma during this accident that caused significant damage to his brain, which led him to slowly lose his mind, or, just caused brain injury that changed his demeanor and made him more short-tempered and irrational. There was one source that I read, or that I saw, that did say that the autopsy of Charles's body that they did revealed that there wasn't any previous brain injury that could have caused this. So there was obviously the brain damage caused from the bullet from when he shot himself, but although I guess it wasn't really confirmed in any of the sources I saw of how he shot himself, if he shot himself in the head or somewhere else. The autopsy didn't show any previous signs of brain trauma or brain injury. So I think that theory was sort of ruled out. The second theory is much more sinister, or at least I think. So there were rumors that were circulating that Charles decided to kill his entire family because there was a dark family secret that he was determined to keep hidden. So the secret was that Charles was in an incestuous relationship with his oldest daughter, Marie, and that he had actually gotten her pregnant. And in order to prevent this from getting out or prevent the baby from being born, he just snapped and decided to kill everyone. Of course, there's nothing really to substantiate this rumor other than speculation. So
Didn't they do an autopsy on the daughter and see if she was pregnant?
there was never anything that came out about that at all either. So there was never, the only thing that ever substantiated this was like some sort of hearsay or other claims by other people. But I guess they didn't, either they didn't do an autopsy or they did the autopsy and it wasn't like revealed to the public, the results. So maybe people, you know what I mean? Like maybe they knew the results, but no one else in the town did. So people were just jumping to conclusions.
Okay.
But it was like speculated that, they were in this, it's just like the sources I was talking was like an incestuous relationship. So I don't know. I mean, I think she was 17 at the time. Whether it was like consensual, I don't know if it can be if she's only 17, or something, or I don't know if he was molesting her or something, but that was kind of like the rumors that she was pregnant and he was the father. And so in the Deadly Secrets, the Lawson Family Murder podcast, a woman named Trudy J. Smith, she's the author of a book that's called White Christmas, Bloody Christmas, which was released in 1990. That book is focused on this case, and she talks a little bit on this podcast. And she says that just before the book was to be released back in 1990, a woman by the name of Stella Lawson Bolus, she was a relative of the family, so she was the Lawson children's cousin, I guess. And she came forward with these claims that Marie was pregnant with Charles's baby. She said that it was time that the secret be let out and that people know the truth about what really happened. Other than this, I haven't really seen any other credible evidence other than Stella's word that this is what happened. But according to Stella, it was like kind of well known in the family that this was truth, and that was the reason why he did this. But again, there's no real clear evidence on that at all. It has been assumed that his act was premeditated because of the trip that he took with his family weeks before the massacre for that family portrait. It's kind of been assumed that he planned to kill his family on Christmas Day and wanted to preserve his family in this painting for the years to come, or as a way to remember them after he committed the act. So maybe he didn't originally plan to kill himself and wanted the portrait for himself as a memory of them, or just in some dark, twisted way, he wanted this moment etched in time so that they could all be remembered in the future. Who knows? We'll never know the real reasons for that trip, but maybe it was totally innocent, but signs point to the fact that he likely planned to kill them all along before that Christmas. Like he planned before that Christmas morning to do it based on that trip that he took. And I don't really know. So people kind of have assumed that it was premeditated, but we'll never really know. Also, another question that came out was like, did he purposely mean to spare his oldest son Arthur by purposely letting him go into town for ammunition so that he wouldn't be there to witness the massacre or be a victim of it? So I guess I was going to ask you, like, what do you guys think? Do you think it was a premeditated act, or do you think that Charles purposely wanted Arthur to live? That's why he sent him away and into town. And what are your thoughts on the two main theories that surround this case?
I don't know. For me, maybe it does seem like he wanted to spare Arthur for some reason, but then maybe after Arthur left, he was just thinking, or maybe that's when he just snapped and was like, there's nobody here to stop me, so I can go ahead and do this. So I don't know either way about that. The other pregnancy one, I just don't know why there wouldn't be an autopsy, and if there was, why that info wouldn't come out to kind of corroborate that. So I'm not sure about that one either. Also, the little notes in his pocket, like what is that about? If it's not premeditated, like what are those notes? It always bothers me when there's like a note. It's like, why not just say what you mean in a note? Like, why does it always have to be cryptic? So I don't know. I can't decide.
I really don't know. This case is just crazy to me, and there's so many things that like you think that could be true that aren't true, but and also going to like a case like why wouldn't they do an autopsy and like reveal those information to make those rumors, if they're real, they're real. If they're not, they're not. Like, why keep it a secret for that long?
Yeah, I don't No, and I don't think if they did an autopsy on Marie, like maybe she was. I mean, obviously, if you do an autopsy, you would know. I was gonna say if she was still very early term. I mean, obviously, you would still know if you did an autopsy, but maybe they weren't. Maybe they did their autopsy wrong, or maybe she was pregnant, and maybe I don't know. Like maybe it was years later that those rumors came out, so they didn't think they had to address it. I don't know. Like it's
Maybe they don't look at that kind of thing in a regular autopsy. Or you think you would, but maybe they just didn't think about that. So maybe,
yeah,
maybe they
not
didn't
back
do.
then.
Yeah, so maybe they didn't even look at that back then. And by the time those rumors came out, yeah, like you said, it was years later, and they couldn't have any way to look at that.
Yeah, and so I don't know about that. Like all we really have is the word of this woman named Stella, and like the rumors going around the town. So I don't really know. Also, I guess about Arthur. I was thinking like maybe he sent him into town for the ammunition and was like planning to do the massacre when Arthur got back, but like maybe it was because the two younger girls were heading out and they were going to their aunts and uncles, and he thought, well, like I need to do it now because they're going to be gone, and I can't really do it later. So he thought like maybe he saw that as his last opportunity. So maybe it was kind of like just by chance Arthur got spared just because he happened to be in town. I don't really see it as something that he purposely did, but maybe he did want to like spare his eldest son so that he could continue the bloodline or something, you know.
Yeah, that's true. But and also, if it was because he like got his daughter pregnant, why? This is obviously still a horrible thought, but why not just kill her? Why kill the entire family?
Yeah, because maybe he thought like once he killed her, then everyone would know, and then he couldn't really go back.
I guess, but he could have made it look like an accident, like, not have to shoot her in the fucking head. He could have done something else. I don't know. I guess maybe he just panicked and snapped and had to kill everybody.
Yeah, like clearly he wasn't in his right mind. Obviously, if you're gonna kill your whole entire family, you aren't in your right mind. So I don't really know if I buy into the pregnancy theory. Like I don't really like. I tend to believe like maybe, although I guess they ruled that out with the autopsy that he didn't have brain injury from that injury. I think maybe he was suffering from some mental illness, and back in the 1920s, that's not something that would ever be thought about.
Yeah. Did he have a history of being a strict father or like abusive to his kids, like physically, any other way, like abusive to his wife? Was there anything like that in his history?
No, nothing that I could see. There was nothing out there that said that he was like super strict or more strict than other families at that time. I feel like maybe all parents were a little bit strict back in the 1920s. So nothing that stood out as being any more strict than normal. But people did think it was weird that they all went into town for that. He bought them all new clothes, and the family portrait was weird. And they were just like, they weren't like super poor, but they weren't well off. I mean, they were still kind of living paycheck to paycheck or just trying to make ends meet, right? So I think just the stresses of that, I don't know. But I think it could have just been like a case of a mental illness that just festered, and he didn't obviously talk about it or get help, so resulted in that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it's strange. So like it does seem just out of nowhere, because obviously we don't know any of the background. But yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's just super weird, and it's one of those things where it's so long ago now too. It's like we'll never ever know, obviously, because he knew much more, and then he killed himself. And who knows what the deal with those notes was? That doesn't really sound like the writings of someone who was in their right mind. He seemed like maybe they made sense to him, but he obviously wasn't in his right mind because they're like half completed sentences. They're not even making sense. So I don't.
Yeah,
really
that's
know.
weird. Those notes bother me. It's like, why and what were you trying to say? Like, fucking just say it.
Yeah, it's like no one to blame but, and then trouble can cause. So it's like that could mean so many things. Like no one to blame but who.
Yeah, it almost does seem like he was going through some sort of mental break, and he couldn't even like get his thoughts in order enough to write a complete sentence. Like that kind of does make sense with the whole mental illness theory. Like he really lost it, and he just couldn't even think straight enough to write a note properly.
Yeah. And I was wondering, like, did he write them while he was pacing, like, in the woods? I mean, did they find a pen or something? Or feather quill? I don't know. And whatever. Back then, I don't know if it was that long ago.
I feel like it was a feather quill. That's what I was picturing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe they had pens and pencils in 1929, maybe. But I was like, so did he write that, like, way in advance? Or I want to know those details. Obviously, we'll never know. But the notes do bother me because all you needed was one more name. No one's fault but who?
I know, right?
Marie's, like the wife. who? I don't know.
Ugh.
And then yeah, so very frustrating, and because it's so long ago, obviously we'll never know because people have died, even like the locals probably, right, who were around. So now it's like a bad game of telephone where it's like the like daughters and like the children and the grandchildren of all these people are now like passing down this story, but now it's all hearsay and rumor. So no one
Oh
knows.
yeah, it's been told so many times. There's like so many things about it probably that aren't true anymore. So you don't know really
Yeah.
what happened. Yeah.
So it's just one of those ones where we'll never know. And not that we really do know, like in other cases where people kill, I mean, like what's it called? Familicide? It's like where people kill their whole entire family. Like there's obviously been cases of that are more recent, like Chris Watts and all that. And we still don't really know.
Yeah. Well, especially when they kill themselves too. When they kill
Yeah.
themselves, there's really no explanation because they're obviously not here to give it. So yeah.
But even I think if something like that happens nowadays, it's like, okay, there is much more ways to possibly find out answers, like, a cell phone trail or cell phone searches or something, back then when it's like very hard to track where people are. You know what I mean? Like he could have been having an affair that was about to be revealed other than with Marie, like, with someone else. Who knows?
Yeah, but that'd be a lot harder to trace, right? Because like you were just saying,
Yeah.
there's no trail. There's no like electronic trail to somebody else.
Yeah. Like you have to go on a horse and carriage to his mistress's house or something. And you can't
Yeah.
you don't track that, right? You're
Follow
gone
the
for hours.
pigeon, the carrier pigeon.
Yeah, I mean maybe
Notes
yeah, I
back
mean
and
maybe
forth.
it's not the 1800s, so maybe they do. I don't know what life was like in the 1920s.
I think they had phones at least, didn't they? Like
a
old
telegram.
school phones.
I don't know. They alerted
When
the
was
sheriff
this-
by telegram, according to some sources.
Oh,
so.
right.
Which I wouldn't. I thought they still had a phone. I don't know. Super long time ago. But yeah, so just like a lot of questions that we'll never really know the answers to. But the only like a little bit of well, not really an update because it's still a super long time ago. But the only surviving child, so Arthur, he actually ended up dying in a freak car accident in 1945, and he was only 31 at the time, and he had a wife and 4 children at the time of his death. So even though he survived, he only lived 16 more years after that. And then died in 1945. Who knows what he told his children, right? And then they have to like pass it on. So like I said, it's just people telling people, rumors and stuff.
Jeez, it must have been so crazy for him. Like he comes home and his whole family's gone. Like that's pretty traumatizing.
Yeah, at the hands of his own father. Like it wasn't even an intruder, like a random. It was his own dad. So it's just crazy. And he probably feels guilty too, like, the survivor's guilt of like, why I was the one that survived. And he probably wondering like, did he know?
Yeah.
Is that why he sent me into town to go get this ammunition?
Yeah, maybe he was thinking if he didn't go into town, he would have been there and could have done something.
Yeah, so I feel really bad for him too.
Yeah.
Just a horrible situation all around. And like, what a horrible Christmas. Like, why on Christmas too, of all days? Like Christmas Day. Just seems so much the added cruelty of doing it.
Well, maybe because it was, I mean, it's cruel in itself, but maybe because Christmas is a stressful time of year, and it's, if you don't have money and you're depressed, it could.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. I don't know how commercialized Christmas was back then, though, so it might not have been as much pressure to have like a billion presents under your tree as it is
like
today.
it is now.
Yeah.
So,
like,
but I mean, still.
Like, there wasn't even talk. Like the sources I say, it's like Marie got up to go make her favorite dish for Christmas dinner. Like, I don't even know if they had presents. Like, it didn't say anything about they opened up presents. It was more like Arthur went out rabbit hunting with his dad, and Marie and Fanny were like making food. So, like, I don't even know if it was a case of like they even had a bunch of presents.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they did. Maybe, well, they got new clothes a few weeks before, and the new portrait, that was their Christmas.
Yeah, maybe that was,
Yeah, so super sad. And I hadn't actually never heard anything about this case until like we were going to do the Christmas mini, and I was like looking up cases that happened around Christmas, and I came across this one. But it's pretty crazy case, and there is like quite a few like podcasts out there that cover it and stuff. So it is wild. It's a wild case for sure.
It's weird that there's podcasts and stuff on cases like this, because like it happened such a long time ago that even crazy that there's even like an ounce of information on it, because back then like it was hard to get like media, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it seems like there's not enough out there for people to be like talking about it for episodes on episodes.
Yeah.
There's a couple of YouTubers that like who do have true crime YouTube channels who covered it, but they're also short videos. So people just kind of outline the facts and say like this is what happened, but because there's so little that we actually know, it's
Interesting. It's like a mystery, that one of those things that we're just never gonna know the answer to.
Yeah, it's definitely super sad. And yeah, that's your Christmas mini. Hope it didn't damper your Christmas too much. But you also chose to press play, so I'm just kidding. Happy holidays. Thank you for listening to our mini episode, and thank you for being a patron. And yeah, we'll see you on the main show on Wednesday. We're continuing our serial killer mini series, so look forward to that on Wednesday. So thank you so much, and happy holidays, and take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.